Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you are about to step into right now is dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, because today I'm going to expose the scriptures the devil hates. Scriptures that break poverty, destroy lack, and pull wealth into your life like a magnet. And listen to me carefully. The greatest attacks on your destiny don't come from storms outside you. They come from habits and thoughts designed to drain your power from the inside. But once you activate these verses, once you align your mind, your energy, and your spirit, poverty loses its authority over you forever. Stay right here, because what you're about to hear will shift your entire life. Poverty is never just a financial condition. It is a spiritual vibration that begins in the unseen realm long before it appears in a person's bank account or daily life. It is a mindset formed by repetition, surroundings, and beliefs that were often picked up unknowingly. When a person accepts the idea that they are limited, unworthy, or destined to struggle, that belief becomes a spiritual prison that shapes every decision they make. Poverty is a frequency of fear, scarcity, and internal contradiction, and the enemy thrives in those environments because they weaken vision and silence courage. Scripture, however, operates on a completely higher plane of power, authority, and spiritual alignment. When spoken with intention, Scripture cuts through invisible chains and rewires the atmosphere inside a person's soul. The devil hates these 6 scriptures not because of the words themselves, but because of what those words do to a person's spiritual alignment. They turn doubt into faith, fear into boldness, confusion into clarity, and stagnation into forward movement. That is why poverty loses power the moment Scripture is declared with conviction. The enemy knows that the battle of abundance is won or lost in the mind long before it ever shows up in the natural world. If he can get someone to believe that their circumstances are final, their failures are permanent, or their dreams are unrealistic, he has succeeded in trapping them without chains. Most people do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack belief in the greatness already placed inside them. Scripture interrupts that internal dialogue by reintroducing truth that is greater than circumstances. When a person speaks verses of provision, blessing, overflow, and divine guidance, they begin to dissolve the subconscious lies that poverty relies on. The devil hates this process because it is impossible for a person to repeatedly speak truth and remain enslaved to a lie. Every declaration weakens the spiritual roots of lack, dismantling the fear that once felt so heavy and immovable. Poverty cannot survive in a mind that is aligned with divine abundance. Every scripture that declares prosperity, increase, or divine supply carries a spiritual vibration that is higher than the frequency of fear. When you speak them, you are not simply repeating words, you are reshaping your inner atmosphere. Words are containers of energy, and Scripture is the highest form of spiritual energy available to the human mind. Poverty attaches itself to uncertainty, hesitation, and emotional instability, but Scripture stabilizes the mind and strengthens the will. Once a person begins speaking truth daily, their internal world stops agreeing with limitation and starts agreeing with divine possibility. The enemy hates this because he cannot manipulate a person who realizes their own spiritual authority. As Scripture comes out of your mouth, confidence rises, mental clarity returns, and the emotional heaviness of survival mode begins to fade. You stop thinking like a victim and begin operating like someone aligned with divine purpose. And when that shift happens internally, everything external begins to change. The real transformation begins when Scripture moves from words you read to truths you believe deeply. Speaking is the first step, believing is the second, and embodying is the third. When you speak a scripture repeatedly, your subconscious begins to accept it as reality, and your spiritual energy shifts to match its promise. The devil hates this because belief activates spiritual law, and spiritual law creates change that cannot be reversed by external forces. As your inner world rises to a higher vibration, doors begin to open that were once closed, ideas come to you that once felt impossible, and solutions appear where problems used to dominate. Poverty relies on mental blindness, but Scripture restores vision. Poverty relies on self-doubt, but Scripture restores identity. Poverty relies on fear of the future, but Scripture restores expectation and hope. And once those internal elements shift, the person becomes unstoppable in the natural realm. Every time you speak Scripture, You are declaring that you refuse to let your past define your future. You are refusing to accept the limitations placed on you by environment, upbringing, or past mistakes. You are refusing to let the enemy rob you of the abundance that was already assigned to your life by divine design. Scripture activates spiritual momentum, and momentum is the enemy of poverty, because poverty thrives in stagnation. When you begin speaking abundance, you stop settling, you stop shrinking, and you stop apologizing for wanting more. Your spirit rises, your standards rise, and your actions begin to reflect what you believe rather than what you fear. The devil hates this spiritual elevation because it makes his influence powerless. Scripture realigns you with strength, confidence, and divine inheritance, pulling you out of the vibration of lack and anchoring you into the vibration of abundance. Most people never realize how much spiritual energy is required to build a life of abundance, discipline, clarity, and purpose. Every major breakthrough you desire demands focus, consistency, and a mind that is fully present. But the enemy's strategy is to drain that energy through subtle habits that feel harmless. Daily self-indulgence, emotional escapes, and addictive routines are designed to weaken your inner strength without you noticing the damage. When a person gives in to impulses repeatedly, their spiritual energy leaks away in small doses until they no longer have the strength to chase their destiny. The enemy does not need to destroy a person with catastrophic events when he can simply keep them distracted, tired, unfocused, and controlled by their desires. Every time you lose control to temporary pleasure, you lose a piece of your ability to think clearly and act boldly. Wealth requires strategic thinking, not scattered thinking. Purpose requires discipline, not impulses. Alignment requires self-mastery, not self-neglect. The enemy knows that a distracted person is a defeated person before the battle even starts. Energy is the currency of creation. Whatever you build in your life, you build with your inner energy long before it shows up physically. When your energy is high, your decisions are strong, your thinking is sharp, and your spirit is fully aligned with your purpose. But when your energy is low because of repeated self-indulgent habits, you lose the capacity to make powerful choices. You start settling for less, shrinking your vision, and losing the fire that once pushed you forward. The enemy celebrates every moment you waste in cycles that drain your vitality, because he knows every wasted hour delays your destiny. He understands that the more tired, unfocused, and emotionally numb you become, the easier you are to control. The real attack is not on your body but on your focus, because focus determines direction and direction determines destiny. When your energy is scattered across cravings, impulses, and distractions, you cannot create anything meaningful or enduring. You become spiritually weak, mentally foggy, and emotionally unstable, making poverty easier to manipulate into your life. Self-indulgence is not just a habit, it is a doorway through which the enemy enters to steal potential, time, clarity, and spiritual strength. Every indulgent act seems small in the moment, but repeated daily, it conditions the mind to choose comfort over growth. It trains the body to expect pleasure instead of discipline, and it convinces the spirit to accept mediocrity instead of greatness. Purpose requires sacrifice, but indulgence encourages avoidance. Wealth requires delayed gratification, but indulgence encourages instant gratification. Abundance requires clarity, but indulgence clouds the mind with confusion and emotional heaviness. When a person lives in cycles of indulgence, they become spiritually numb and unable to hear the voice of divine guidance clearly. Their instincts weaken, their inner conviction fades, and their ability to make courageous decisions disappears. This is why the enemy uses indulgence as a weapon, because it destroys destiny silently, slowly, and deceptively. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you reclaim spiritual authority and take back ground that was stolen from you. Self-control is not just a moral concept, it is a spiritual superpower that elevates you above distraction. When you refuse to be ruled by urges, cravings, and emotional reactions, you become a vessel strong enough to hold abundance. Wealth does not flow to people who are unstable, unfocused, or driven by impulse. It flows to those who can handle it with clarity, responsibility, and wisdom. Discipline sharpens your thinking, strengthens your spirit, and amplifies your ability to manifest what you desire. The enemy hates discipline people because they are hard to manipulate. He loses leverage over a person who no longer surrenders to comfort at the cost of their calling. Discipline creates internal momentum, and momentum attracts opportunities, ideas, connections, and breakthroughs. When your inner world is fortified by discipline, your outer world begins to shift accordingly. Self-indulgence, no matter the form it takes, always steals something far more valuable than a moment of pleasure. It steals time you cannot get back, energy you cannot afford to lose, and focus that is required to build a life of success. It distracts you from your goals, delays your progress, and keeps you spiritually and mentally exhausted. The enemy knows that an exhausted person cannot dream big, cannot make strong decisions, and cannot take bold action. This is why he attacks through habits that drain you quietly, not storms that are obvious. When your energy is low, fear feels bigger, challenges feel heavier, and progress feels impossible. You begin living in survival mode instead of creation mode, reacting to life instead of designing it. But when you break the cycle of indulgence, your energy returns, your vision clears, and your inner confidence rises. You feel alive again, empowered again, ready again, and abundance begins to gravitate toward you. When you take control of your habits, you take control of your destiny. You reclaim authority over your mind, emotions, and desires, becoming a spiritual force that the enemy can no longer weaken. You begin operating from strength instead of weakness, clarity instead of confusion, and discipline instead of indulgence. Your ability to attract wealth increases because you are finally aligned with the vibration of abundance instead of the vibration of lack. Your decisions improve, your environment shifts, and your opportunities multiply. The enemy fears people who master themselves because they become impossible to defeat. When your energy is preserved, your spirit is aligned, and your mind is focused, you become a magnet for divine ideas, breakthroughs, and supernatural favor. Self-indulgence loses its power, distractions lose their grip, and poverty loses its influence over your life forever. Your words are not empty sounds. They are creative forces that shape the spiritual atmosphere around you long before you ever see results in the natural world. Every word you speak carries intention, vibration, and authority, especially when it comes from Scripture. When you speak abundance, you activate spiritual laws that begin rearranging circumstances, opportunities, and even the direction of your life. Most people speak according to what they see, not realizing that what they see is the result of what they have been speaking for years. When a person repeatedly declares lack, fear, and limitation, they subconsciously align with poverty. But when someone repeatedly speaks Scripture filled with promises of prosperity, victory, and divine provision, they rise into a different spiritual frequency. The enemy hates this shift because your words begin to cancel every lie he tried to plant in your mind. You become the architect of your reality through the legislation of your tongue. Scripture is not poetic language meant to sound comforting. It is divine law designed to govern the outcome of your life. Every verse is a decree from the highest spiritual court, and when you speak it, you enforces that law over your environment. Poverty cannot stand where divine law is spoken with authority, because truth dissolves every lie that fear tries to sustain. When you declare that you are blessed, you activate the law of blessing. When you declare that abundance is yours, you activate the law of increase. When you declare that God supplies your needs, you activate the law of divine provision. The devil despises this because Scripture removes his legal access to your thoughts and emotions. Your declarations become shields that block fear, doubt, and limitation from entering your spirit. What you speak creates a spiritual climate, and your climate determines your harvest. Your mind is constantly listening to the words you speak, and those words form the blueprint of your belief system. Whatever you speak long enough becomes the identity you accept, the decisions you make, and the future you create. If you talk about fear, your mind prepares for loss. If you talk about lack, your mind expects limitation. But if you talk about abundance, your mind becomes a magnet for opportunity and alignment. Words create internal architecture. Scripture creates divine architecture. Speaking verses of wealth and provision rewires the subconscious patterns that poverty depends on. The enemy hates people who speak Scripture because he cannot infiltrate the mind of someone who reinforces truth daily. The more consistently you declare abundance, the more your thoughts, emotions, and actions become synchronized with prosperity instead of struggle. You stop attracting what hurts you and start attracting what was meant for you. Every declaration you speak is like a seed planted in the soil of your spirit. And seeds always produce after their own kind. If you plant seeds of fear, you reap hesitation. If you plant seeds of doubt, you reap confusion. If you plant seeds of abundance, you reap increase. The universe responds to your words because your words reveal your expectation. And expectation is a spiritual command. When you speak scripture, you are not hoping something will happen. You are commanding the spiritual realm to align with divine truth. The enemy hates this because spoken scripture leaves no room for fear to grow. Your declarations uproot negative patterns that have been sitting in your mind for years. You stop tolerating poverty and begin rejecting it. You stop accepting scarcity and start expecting overflow. The spiritual soil of your life begins to transform with every truth you plant. Speaking scripture consistently builds spiritual momentum, and once momentum begins, poverty cannot keep up with you. Momentum turns small changes into massive transformation because every spoken word adds pressure to the spiritual resistance that once held you back. The more you speak, the more your inner world shifts from survival to creation. The more you speak, the more your spirit detaches from limitation and attaches to possibility. Momentum breaks stagnation, and stagnation is the breeding ground for lack. The enemy hates when you gain momentum because a person in motion cannot be controlled. Once your declarations start reshaping your emotional patterns, your decisions become bolder, your ideas become clear, and your actions become more intentional. You begin walking with authority, thinking with clarity, and moving with divine confidence. Momentum makes poverty impossible to sustain. What you decree with faith eventually becomes the reality you live in, because the physical world bends to the spiritual laws you activate. When you speak scripture, you are not only shaping your internal world, but also influencing the opportunities that come toward you. Words rearrange relationships, reveal pathways, and attract resources that were previously invisible. You begin meeting the right people, receiving divine ideas, and recognizing open doors that you once overlooked. Scripture spoken with consistency becomes a magnet for supernatural alignment. The enemy hates this because once your words shift your atmosphere, he loses his ability to manipulate your circumstances. You become attuned to divine timing, divine connections, and divine strategies. Your life begins to reflect the abundance you have been declaring. Your declarations give instructions to your future, shaping the world you are walking into even before you arrive there. Poverty thrives on silence because silence leaves the atmosphere empty, allowing negative thoughts and influences to dominate. But when you fill your world with the sound of scripture, you leave no room for lack to take root. Your future begins aligning with your words long before you see evidence of change. You stop reacting to circumstances and start creating them through intentional speech. The enemy hates the sound of your voice when it carries truth, because it dismantles every spiritual structure he built to keep you small. The more you speak, the more powerful you become. And the more powerful you become, the less access he has to your life. Your voice becomes the instrument through which your destiny takes shape, and abundance becomes the atmosphere you live in. Wealth does not appear in the life of someone who is spiritually fragmented, mentally scattered, or emotionally unstable, because abundance responds to alignment, not stress. When your inner world is in conflict, your outer world reflects that confusion through missed opportunities and inconsistent results. The enemy works tirelessly to break your alignment by attacking your habits, your emotions, your discipline, and even your self-image. He knows that when your mind is divided, your decisions weaken. And when your decisions weaken, your results collapse. Alignment is when your thoughts, words, beliefs, and actions all move in the same direction with purpose and clarity. When you are aligned, you become a magnet for the things that once felt out of reach. The moment you choose inner order over inner chaos, your spiritual vibration rises. Wealth responds to that vibration because it recognizes a vessel capable of holding it without breaking. The enemy hates alignment because it makes you unstoppable. Abundance flows naturally into the life of a person who carries clarity, confidence, and conviction, because these traits create a stable foundation for increase. A scattered mind cannot see opportunities, but a focused mind recognizes them instantly. A fearful heart cannot move forward, but a courageous heart advances even in uncertainty. A person who is spiritually aligned walks with a quiet authority that attracts open doors, divine connections, and strategic breakthroughs. The enemy tries to disrupt this alignment by planting doubt, insecurity, and emotional triggers that pull you out of clarity. Every distraction is designed to lower your vibration so you lose the internal stability wealth requires. But when your inner life becomes disciplined, peaceful, and spiritually tuned, you begin to operate from a higher frequency that repels the chaos of lack. Abundance recognizes people who refuse to be shaken internally, and it gravitates toward them effortlessly. Your transformation accelerates the moment you stop trying to change your life externally and begin aligning yourself internally. When your thoughts match your declarations, your faith matches your expectations, and your actions match your goals, you create a magnetic pull. Alignment makes you consistent, and consistency makes you powerful. Most people fail not because their dream is impossible, but because their inner world is divided against itself. They speak abundance but think fear. They desire success, but practice habits that sabotage it. They pray for increase, but live in a vibration of doubt. Alignment breaks this cycle by uniting all parts of your being into agreement with the life you want to create. The enemy fights alignment because he understands that a unified mind is unconquerable. When you become fully aligned, poverty loses its grip because your spirit refuses to resonate with lack. Your energy becomes too high, too focused, and too intentional for scarcity to survive. Every battle you win internally moves you closer to abundance externally because the outer world always reflects the condition of your inner atmosphere. When you let go of conflicting beliefs, self-sabotaging habits, and emotional instability, you create space for wealth to enter. Poverty often hides in the areas where you lack discipline, clarity, or self-control, but alignment exposes these weaknesses and replaces them with strength. The enemy's goal is to keep you emotionally reactive so he can influence your decisions. But alignment makes you unshakable. You become grounded, strategic, and spiritually anchored, making you impossible to manipulate. Your energy becomes focused instead of fractured. Your thoughts become intentional instead of scattered, and your actions become purposeful instead of impulsive. When all of this comes into harmony, a powerful shift occurs. You stop chasing abundance, and abundance begins chasing you. This is the spiritual law of alignment at work. Abundance is not attracted to struggle. It is attracted to those who radiate clarity, certainty, and self-mastery. When your inner world becomes calm, organized, and elevated, you move through life with a confidence that draws breakthroughs toward you. You stop begging for opportunities and start magnetizing them by the strength of your inner alignment. The enemy's greatest fear is a person who has mastered themselves, because such a person cannot be delayed, deceived, or derailed. Alignment removes the spiritual clutter that once blocked your blessing, and it creates a pathway for overflow to reach you without resistance. It elevates your thinking, sharpens your intuition, and strengthens your decision-making. Wealth responds to people who are ready for it, and readiness is the result of alignment. When your vibration matches the reality you seek, the spiritual realm has no choice but to deliver it. You become a living embodiment of abundance, drawing prosperity into every area of your life.